My name is Margaret Whitlow, and on Mother's Day I learned what it feels like to be erased while still standing in the room. It was a Sunday morning trimmed in sunlight, the kind that makes even dust look like celebration. I wore my favorite green dress, the one that makes me feel like I still remember how to be elegant, and I carried a bouquet of freesia and a paper box of lemon tarts for the grandchildren. The moment the door opened at my daughter's place, little Sophie barreled into me, all elbows and delight. "Gran!" she squealed, clinging to my waist. "We made you something." For a heartbeat, everything was perfect. The living room was honey warm. Balloons tugged at their ribbons. A banner drooped over a mantel crowded with family photos I had paid to frame. Thomas, my son-in-law, lifted a hand from the kitchen island without looking up. It was a gesture that wanted to pass as greeting but couldn't be bothered to do the work. My daughter Emily came out of the kitchen with a bright, chilly smile that never reached her eyes. "Hi, Mum," she said. "We have a surprise." Oliver, the eldest, settled cross-legged at my feet. Sophie parked herself beside him, bouncing. Emily opened her purse and took out a pink card decorated with wobbly flowers drawn in felt tip. "From all of us," she said, pressing it into my hands. "Read it out so everyone can hear." I sat forward on the sofa, smoothing the card with my thumbs. The paper smelled faintly of children's glue. "How lovely," I said. I began in my clearest voice. "Roses are red, violets are—" The next line was a fist. "You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here." Silence landed in the room, thick, stunned, close, then split clean open with Thomas's laugh. It was a sharp, barking sound, the kind men make when they're proud of their own meanness. Emily covered her mouth like she wanted to swallow her smile, but it leaked out anyway. The children giggled because the adults were laughing, and that's how cruelty breeds, by example. "Did you see your face, Mum?" Emily wheezed, wiping at her eyes. "Thomas, did you get a picture?" My hand shook. The card slid from my fingers and parachuted to the rug. Tears burned down the furrows time has carved along my cheeks. I swallowed. "It's cruel." "Oh, don't be dramatic," Emily said, as if she were instructing a nurse on better bedside manner. "It's a joke." Thomas stooped, scooped the card, and pinched it between two fingers. "Just a bit of fun, Margaret," he said, as though I were an intern who'd bruised a peach at the supermarket. Well, since we're all being honest." He cleared his throat, his voice seeking a respectable register. "You've been rather present." "Present?" I heard myself say, though my voice had gone far away, like a radio dropped down a well. Emily sat opposite me and crossed one leg over the other. She had my mother's ankles and none of her mercy. "We've looked into some very nice senior living communities," she said, bright as a brochure. "People your age, activities, support, senior living." The phrase told in my head as if someone had picked up a bell with my name on it. "I came to celebrate Mother's Day with you," I whispered. "And you are," Thomas said, all condescension and aftershave. "But let's be realistic." Oliver stood, hesitant, and reached for my fingers. "Why are you crying, Gran?" Before I could answer, Emily tugged him back gently. "Gran's fine." "She's just sentimental," I stood. My knees trembled, but I kept them straight. "I should go," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. Too even, like a line read for a part I'd never auditioned for. "Okay, Mum," Emily said, checking her phone as though the conversation had ended itself. "We'll call you later." No one followed me to the door. No one said, "Wait." Outside, the sun was still bright and foolish, and I walked down the path with the kind of dignity that leaves splinters. That night, my little house felt cavernous, the rooms blown wide apart by my humiliation. I cried until my chest ached, until the muscles around my ribs tired of holding the sound in. But there's a shelf inside grief where tears can't reach. When I got there, something shifted. A small click, like a latch pushed home. I washed my face. I made tea I didn't drink. I sat in my armchair, the one where I'd nursed Emily at 2 a.m, patting her back while the radiator hissed, and let memory spool out. Clean and merciless, Emily's father left when she was 3. He left a note, and I left the note in a drawer for 30 years as if it might learn how to apologize. I worked at the textile mill until my palms were laddered with callus and the cuticles wore thin. The night shifts bled into mornings. I stitched uniforms for people who would never know my name, and I saved every spare dollar because my daughter had big eyes and bigger dreams. When she decided on nursing, I sold my mother's jewelry without blinking. "Your education is more important," I told her, and meant it. I remember her graduation day more clearly than my own wedding. The auditorium smelled of varnish and flowers. She hugged me in the parking lot and said, "We did it, Mum." I believed her. I believed we were the kind of family that made promises and kept them. Then came Thomas. Polite at first. Helpful. A man who shook hands and looked you in the eye and asked for nothing he didn't already intend to take. They wanted a proper wedding. I wrote a check I had no business writing because I love the way my daughter looks when she's happy. Later, they wanted a house, and I offered the down payment because I know what it is to lie awake at 2 a.m., counting debts. When the children came, I became free childcare, breakfast chef, Storytime lady, laundress, cleaner, the woman whose hands are always warm. Thank yous dwindled. Suggestions turned into criticisms. "Mum, you muddled the vitamins." "Grace," they called me Grace by mistake sometimes, perhaps thinking of Grace as something I owed them. "You tire easily." When Thomas lost his job 2 years ago, I wired them $500 every month just for a bit, until we find our feet. 6 months later, he had a new salary and my transfer kept going like a quiet river no one remembers to thank. The first time I overheard him on the patio, his voice hushed but confident. "She's getting dependent. We're exploring options." I felt my ribcage turn to a birdcage. I told myself I'd misheard. Kind people mishear on purpose. It's one of the ways we stay kind, but cruelties accumulate. Last Christmas, I brought gifts I couldn't afford, and a pearl necklace that belonged to my grandmother. Emily handed the pearls back to me with a gentle smile. "I don't wear much jewelry," she said, and I smiled too because what else can you do with a small, sharp thing that's just pierced you? 3 months later, when a fever pinned me to my bed, I rang and asked if someone could drop soup. "We're slammed," she said. "Ask a neighbor." Mrs. Whitaker from 2 doors down knocked at dusk with broth and a concern that didn't need training to be real. Emily never called. When I felt steady enough to visit again, the week had been erased as if illness were a choice I'd made to be inconvenient. And then the card. Back in my living room, I pulled an old wooden box from the dresser. It holds my history, deeds and statements, copies of letters, a photograph of my mother at 18 looking like the world had not yet learned her name. Under the papers lay the facts I'd kept private because privacy felt like the last room in the house that belonged to me. My mother had grown up on stories about a small seaside flat in Nassau, family, property entangled in inheritance laws and reefed in paperwork, until it finally surfaced in my name when I turned 70. A property manager had been renting it out for years. The money had been gathering dust in an account I hadn't touched. Add to that a modest inheritance from Aunt Lucille, careful investments I'd tended like houseplants, pruned, repotted, left alone. It wasn't a fortune, not in the way magazines use the word, but it was enough to soften the ground under my feet. Almost $400,000 enough. Enough that burden was a bad joke told by people who never checked the bill. I ran my finger down columns of numbers. I added, subtracted, tallied. In the last 5 years, I had given Emily and Thomas $67,000. Down payment, wedding, monthly help, a pair of laptops for school, a repair when the SUV coughed itself to a halt, a generous slice of a kitchen remodel I never got to cook in. I had paid for birthdays and cakes and the invisibility that comes with being useful. I closed the box. My hand stopped shaking. There is something that happens when a woman who has spent a lifetime apologizing decides she is finished. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is a gentle rethreading of your name through your own mouth. I said mine out loud, Margaret, and the room listened. The next morning, I dressed in my slate gray suit, the one I'd bought for Emily's graduation and never worn again. and I pinned my hair up in a way that reminded me of competence. I left the green dress hanging on the wardrobe door like a promise I no longer had to keep for anyone else. At the bank, Mr. Reeves looked surprised to see me. "Mrs. Whitlow, what can we do for you today?" "We can begin," I said. "We can make some changes." But that is another scene, and this is the end of the first. Because before the numbers and signatures and tickets, there was the night I stopped being Emily's mother in the way she required and remembered how to be Margaret in the way I needed. Before the letters and the flight and the new sky, there was a pink card with felt-tip flowers and a joke that wasn't one. There was a door, and I closed it behind me. And there was a woman in a green dress, standing very still in her living room, learning how to breathe without asking anyone's permission. Morning broke through my curtains in pale streaks of gold. I hadn't slept, only sat there, unmoving, with the wooden box open beside me, my life measured in receipts, bank transfers, and forgotten thank yous. By sunrise, I had stopped crying. My face felt raw, but my heart was strangely steady. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about whether Emily or Thomas might call. I was thinking about myself. When I looked at the numbers again, each transaction, each sacrifice, it wasn't grief that hit me anymore. It was clarity. I hadn't been a burden. I had been their foundation, and they had built their comfort on my silence. I made tea, strong and dark, and drank it while the city yawned awake outside. Then at precisely 8, I put on that slate gray suit again, brushed my silver hair into a bun, and called a taxi. The driver looked surprised when I climbed in. "Where to, love?" "To the bank," I said. "And please don't wait, I've got a few stops to make." "At the bank, Mr. Reeves, my financial advisor, looked startled when I walked into his office. I'd been dealing with him for years, quietly, obediently. The kind of client who nodded at everything and never asked for change. "Mrs. Whitlow," he said, rising from behind his desk. "We weren't expecting you. How can I help today?" "I'm making some adjustments," I said, my tone as crisp as the edge of my suit. Over the next 2 hours, I did what I should have done long ago. I canceled every automatic transfer to Emily's account. I closed the so-called family emergency fund that only ever funded their emergencies. And I consolidated all my savings and investments into my own private account, solely mine. Mr. Reeves blinked as he read through the forms. "You're aware these are significant changes, yes?" "Perfectly aware," I said. "It's time to keep my money in the hands that earned it." He hesitated. "You're sure everything's all right?" "This is unlike you." "Mr. Reeves," I said softly. "Everything is exactly right for the first time in a long time." He smiled faintly then, understanding something unspoken. "I'll see to it immediately." The lawyer from the bank, I went straight to my solicitor's office. Mr. Franklin had handled my affairs since Emily was born. He still kept a photograph of his late wife on his desk. A kind man with kind eyes, the sort who always asked after your health before your signature. When I told him I wanted to rewrite my will, his eyebrows lifted. "That's quite a decision, Margaret. Has something happened?" "Yes," I said. "I woke up. I explained what I wanted, every detail of it. The money that was once meant for Emily and Thomas would now go to a foundation for abandoned seniors. The beachfront property in Nassau would be sold if I ever passed without claiming it. A trust would be set up for Oliver and Sophie, but they'd only inherit if they chose to have a real relationship with me once they were adults, not one forced through guilt or obligation. Mr. Franklin tapped his pen, studying me carefully. "You've thought this through?" "I've spent 74 years thinking, Mr. Franklin," I said, "and I'm done mistaking guilt for love." He nodded slowly. "Then let's make it official." I signed the documents with a steady hand. Not a single tremor. For decades I had signed checks, receipts, permission slips, all to serve others. This was the first signature that felt like it truly belonged to me. A new beginning outside. The day had turned brilliantly blue. I walked the high street with a confidence that surprised me. I passed a dress shop I hadn't noticed before. Sleek displays, linen and silk in the window. The kind of place I used to hurry past, thinking that's not for people like me. But today I stepped inside. The young clerk smiled warmly. "Looking for something special, ma'am?" "Yes," I said. "Something for a woman who's finally decided to live." I left with a cream-colored linen dress and a wide-brimmed hat. Nothing extravagant, but elegant. It made me feel like sunlight might finally touch me without apology. The travel agency by mid-afternoon, I found myself standing in front of a travel agency I hadn't visited in years. The posters in the window were faded: Santorini, Paris, Maldives, but one caught my eye. Nassau, Bahamas. Blue water, white sand. The caption read, "A second chance at paradise." Inside, the agent was a woman about my age, with auburn hair and an accent that carried the warmth of Dorset. Her name badge said Linda. "How can I help you today?" she asked cheerfully. "I'd like a one-way ticket to Nassau," I said. Her pen paused. "One way?" "Yes," I replied. "I own a property there. I think it's time I see it for myself." Linda's eyes softened. "Good for you, love. Sometimes we wait too long to start living." "Not anymore. I bought a first-class ticket." The agent printed it carefully, sliding it across the counter as though she were handing me a new life. "Leaving this Friday," she said. "Would you like help arranging transport or accommodation once you arrive?" I smiled. "No need. I already have a place to stay." The letters that evening, I brewed another cup of tea and sat at my writing desk. I took out my old stationery, cream paper with a faint lavender scent. I had bought it years ago, thinking I'd use it for birthday notes to Emily. I never did. The first letter was for her. "My dearest Emily, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, not from this world, only from your reach. I'll be on a plane to Nassau, to the home you never knew existed. You won't be receiving the $500 each month anymore. I've canceled the transfers and closed the account. Please don't see this as punishment. It's simply the lesson I failed to teach you. That love is not measured in money, and a mother's kindness is not an endless credit line. You once told me I was your angel. Then slowly, you decided angels were servants. The card you made for Mother's Day was the final truth I needed to hear. You no longer see me as your mother, only as a burden. I hope someday you understand that you didn't just lose my support. You lost the woman who would have done anything for you. My inheritance will go to those who truly value care and respect. If you wish to know me again, you will have to earn it, not with guilt or gifts, but with sincerity. Your mother." Margaret. Then came the second letter for Thomas. "Thomas, I once thought of you as the son I never had. But I heard you that night on the patio, discussing where to place me. You made me sound like old furniture that didn't match the decor. What you didn't know is that I have choices, more than you imagined. The property in Nassau, the investments, the savings, all mine. For years, my money kept your family afloat. You mistook my generosity for weakness, my silence for ignorance. You'll have to learn to stand without leaning on the woman you dismissed. Regards, Margaret Whitlow." I placed both letters on the coffee table and stared at them for a long time. There was no satisfaction, no vengeance, only a deep, aching calm. The next step before bed, I walked around the house, running my hands along the furniture. Every surface carried fingerprints of the life I had built. Photographs of Emily as a child, her toothy grin at age 5. The first day she held her newborn son. All moments I'd financed, cherished, and then been erased from. I took one photo, the oldest, from her graduation day, and slipped it into my suitcase. Not as a reminder of her betrayal, but of the woman I had been then, proud, hopeful, unbroken. When I finally turned off the lights, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt clean, like the air before a storm clears. I didn't know what Nassau would bring. Maybe peace. Maybe loneliness, but it would be mine, and that was enough. I fell asleep with the faintest smile, unaware that the next morning would bring the first twist in my story, the moment everything I thought I'd planned would take a turn I never saw coming. Friday arrived with a sky washed clean after rain, pale and endless. I woke before dawn, not from nerves but from anticipation. My suitcase sat by the door, neat, modest, full of clothes that finally belonged only to me. I brewed one last cup of tea in that little kitchen. The hum of the kettle felt like an old friend saying goodbye. I looked around my house, the clock that ticked too loud, the threadbare curtains, the armchair that had cradled both joy and despair. It was no mansion, but it was mine, and it had been kind. The letters to Emily and Thomas rested on the coffee table, weighted with a porcelain coaster. They'd find them soon enough. I glanced at the photograph I had packed, Emily at her graduation, beaming. I pressed my thumb to her smile. "Goodbye, my girl," I whispered. "May you one day understand." Then I locked the door, placed the keys in my handbag, and stepped into the crisp London morning. Heathrow. The taxi driver was young and chatty, all easy cheer and radio hum. "Off somewhere nice, miss?" he asked. "Somewhere warm," I said with a small smile. At the terminal, people rushed past me with their luggage and coffees, the soundtrack of lives still in motion. For once I wasn't watching from the sidelines, I was part of the departure board. As I checked in, the attendant looked up from her screen. "Nassau, Mrs. Whitlow? That's a lovely destination. Holiday or home?" "Both, I suppose," I said. "A change of season," she smiled, printing my boarding pass. "You'll love it there." I settled into the first-class lounge, surrounded by quiet wealth. A man in a navy suit read the Times beside me, and a family of tourists discussed diving excursions. For a fleeting moment, I felt the old doubt creep in, the voice that whispered, "You don't belong here." Then I remembered Thomas's laugh, Emily's smirk, and the words on that card. That voice had kept me small for decades. I silenced it with a breath. I did belong here. The encounter, it happened just before boarding. I was standing by the large windows overlooking the runway when I heard a soft, trembling voice behind me. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Whitlow?" I turned. A woman in her 30s stood there, clutching a clipboard. Her airport badge read, "Amelia P. Customer Assistance." She looked nervous, almost apologetic. "Yes, that's me," I said. She hesitated. "I was asked to give you this." She handed me an envelope. My heart skipped. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Emily's, looping and hurried. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single folded page. "Mom, I don't know if you'll read this before you go. The kids found your letter this morning. They don't understand, but I do. I can't say you're wrong. Maybe we did take too much. Maybe I let Thomas's practicality turn me cold. I don't know how to fix what I broke. If you really want to go, I won't stop you. But please don't shut me out forever. I want to talk, to apologize properly. Love, Emily." My hands trembled. For a moment, the world blurred. Voices dulling under the rush of memory. The night's sewing uniforms, her graduation, the laughter of children who once called me magic. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my coat pocket. Amelia looked unsure. "Would you like me to reply, Mrs. Whitlow?" "No," I said softly. "Not yet. Some words need time before they mean anything." She nodded. "Safe travels, then." The flight. The plane lifted off with a roar that rattled through my bones and shook loose the last of my hesitation. Below, London shrank into a patchwork of slate roofs and winding roads. I pressed my hand to the window, watching my old life fade into distance. Hours passed in the hush of first class. Soft lighting, clinking glasses, the murmur of polite conversation. I couldn't sleep. My mind was a carousel of images. Emily as a child. The cruel laughter on Mother's Day. Mr. Reeves's kind nod. The ocean waiting for me, somewhere over the Atlantic. The captain announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing in Nassau shortly." I looked out and saw it. The sea like liquid sapphire, sunlight dancing on the waves. For the first time in years, my chest loosened. Nassau. The airport smelled of salt and heat and new beginnings. I stepped out into the sun, my shoes clicking against the pavement, and for a moment, I simply breathed. A driver from the property management office was waiting with a placard that read, M. Whitlow. He was a tall man with an easy smile. "Welcome home." "Ma'am," he said as he helped me with my bags. "Home," I repeated softly. The word felt strange on my tongue, but good. We drove along the coast, turquoise water glittering to my left, palm trees bending in the breeze. When the car turned into the drive of the condominium, I saw it. White stucco walls, arched balconies, and the shimmer of the sea just beyond. Inside, the air was cool and scented with ocean salt and lemon polish. Everything gleamed. The marble floors, the tall windows, the pale curtains moving like whispers. There was even a vase of fresh lilies on the counter. A note beside them read, "Welcome, Mrs. Whitlow. We're honored to finally meet the owner." I set my suitcase down and walked toward the balcony. The view was breathtaking, endless blue, sunlight catching on the water like glass. And in that silence, broken only by the sound of waves, I felt something I hadn't in decades. Peace, a knock at the door by late afternoon. I had unpacked, showered, and changed into the linen dress I'd bought in London. I was sipping wine on the balcony when someone knocked at the door. For a split second, my heart raced. Who could possibly know I was here? I opened it cautiously. A man stood there, a little older than Emily, sunburnt and smiling. "Mrs. Whitlow?" he asked. "Yes," he extended a folder. "Name's Adrian Clark. I handle the legal side for the management company. I wanted to go over some details about your property's financials." "Of course," I said, stepping aside. He followed me in, his eyes scanning the room. "It's beautiful, isn't it? You've had tenants for nearly 20 years, but the records are, well, quite something." He opened the folder on the table. Rows of figures, statements, rental history. My heart skipped again, but not from fear. From disbelief. The account balance was far higher than what I remembered. "Much higher. Are these numbers correct?" I asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am. Your property's been leased to a private resort company for over a decade. They renewed the contract twice and paid a premium for exclusivity rights. You're owed quite a bit of back revenue." "How much?" He smiled. "After taxes and transfers, approximately $2.3 million. The room swayed. I had to sit down. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I began to laugh, a quiet, astonished laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep and unfamiliar. Years of being dismissed, pitied, reduced to a burden, and all along, I'd been richer than the people who pitied me. I leaned back in my chair, still laughing softly. Thomas once said I was too dependent. Emily said I needed help. Turns out I didn't need anyone at all, but they might, one day, need me. And that, I thought, would be the beginning of their lesson. The next morning, the Caribbean sun woke me before the alarm ever could. I'd left the balcony doors open and the scent of salt drifted in with the breeze. For a moment, I simply lay there, eyes half open, listening to the ocean. It sounded like freedom itself, patient, eternal, unbothered. Then I remembered the number Adrian Clark had told me the previous evening, 2.3 million. The memory felt surreal. The woman who had spent decades counting every pound before buying groceries now had wealth she'd never imagined. A quiet kind of power. The sort that didn't shout. It just existed. The Callie had been in Nassau for 3 days when the call came. My mobile buzzed across the glass table. The screen read Emily. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Then, out of something softer than anger, curiosity perhaps, I answered, "Mum?" Her voice was small. I could hear wind in the background, traffic noise, maybe tears. "You really left?" "Yes," I said calmly. "I told you I would. I didn't think you meant it." There was a pause. I could picture her, standing in that too-perfect kitchen, the one I'd paid to remodel, twisting the hem of her sleeve. The kids keep asking where you are, she went on. Sophie's been crying at night. Oliver keeps saying he didn't mean to laugh. They're too young to understand. I let silence hang between us. I wanted her to feel it, the weight of everything she had dismissed. Finally, I said, "You taught them how to laugh, Emily. Children learn by example." She sniffed. "I know, I've been thinking about that day. The card. Thomas said it was just a joke, but—" "Thomas?" I interrupted softly. "He's the reason you called?" "No, I called because I can't stop thinking about what you wrote. You were right. About all of it. I was selfish. I let him turn me into something ugly. But I never meant to hurt you, Mum." Her voice cracked on the last word. For years I had dreamed of hearing that kind of apology. Now that it had arrived, it felt too late, like rain after the harvest. "Emily," I said gently, "you hurt me because you could. Because I allowed it. I thought being needed meant being loved." "I do love you," she whispered. "Please come home. We'll fix this. I'll make Thomas apologize." I smiled, not bitterly, but with the kind of sadness that comes from growing up at 74. "I am home, darling," I said. "For the first time in my life." "Mum?" "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the place that broke you." She sobbed quietly. "So this is goodbye?" "No, it's the beginning of honesty. And perhaps, someday, understanding." When the call ended, I sat there for a long while, staring at the sea. My hands were steady. My heart was too. The arrival 2 weeks later. As the sun dipped into the horizon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Emily standing there. Windblown and pale, a suitcase beside her. "Mum," she breathed. "I had to see you." For a second, every instinct in me screamed to close the door, to protect the peace I'd earned. But motherhood is a hard habit to break. "Come in," I said. She stepped inside, her eyes sweeping over the high ceilings, the pale marble floors, the ocean beyond the windows. "You live here?" she asked in disbelief. "I do," I said. "This is what your grandmother left me. What I kept secret all these years." Her lips parted. "You had this the whole time?" I nodded. "And yet you thought I was a burden." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mum, I truly am. I don't even know who I was becoming." "Thomas, he didn't understand you. He made jokes, and I went along with them because it was easier than defending you. I hate myself for that." "You shouldn't hate yourself," I said quietly. "Just learn from what you became." She nodded, crying openly now. "Can I stay a few days?" "I won't ask for anything, I just want to be near you." I hesitated. The old me would have said yes immediately, desperate for connection. The new me measured her words, her tone, the truth in her face. Finally, I nodded. "You may stay. But this isn't a retreat from your life, Emily. It's a mirror. Don't look away from what you see here." She agreed. The realization over the next few days, Emily moved quietly through the condo. She helped in the kitchen, walked by the beach, and asked about my plans. I noticed small things. The way she still hesitated before offering help. The way she winced when I mentioned independence. But there was also something new in her. Humility. On the 4th morning, I found her sitting on the balcony, staring out at the sea. She looked younger somehow, or maybe just more honest. "I keep thinking about that card," she said softly. How we laughed. "I can't believe I did that to you." "Cruelty often hides behind laughter," I said. "But remorse is a start." She turned to me. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." "Why didn't you tell us about this money?" "About the property?" I looked at her for a long moment. "Because I wanted to see who you were without it." Her eyes widened slightly, realizing the weight of my answer. "And now you know," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "Now I know." The letter that evening, after Emily went to bed, I wrote one final letter, not to her, but to myself. To Margaret Whitlow, you've spent a lifetime giving everything you had, your time, your strength, your dignity. But you finally remembered the one person who deserved your loyalty most, yourself. You are not a burden. You are not replaceable. You are a woman who survived indifference and found courage in solitude. Whatever happens next, forgiveness, reconciliation, or silence, remember that peace was not given to you. You earned it. Margaret, I folded the letter and placed it in the same wooden box that had once held all my pain. Epilogue. The return of Grace months passed. Emily stayed for 2 weeks, then returned to London. She called occasionally, not out of obligation but warmth. Sometimes the children joined the call, giggling, waving at the screen. Thomas never called. That was fine. Some people need a lifetime to learn humility. As for me, I began to volunteer at a local home for the elderly, not because I felt old, but because I understood what loneliness looked like. The residents called me Miss Margaret with the British pearls. I told them stories of London fog and motherhood, of mistakes and miracles. Every evening, I walked along the beach, the sky painted in pink and gold, the air smelling of salt and beginnings, and sometimes when I closed my eyes, I could almost hear my mother's voice. You teach people how to treat you, Margaret. But first, you must teach yourself. Now, I finally had. I wasn't just Margaret anymore. I was Grace, not the name, but the state of being. And this time, I was never giving it away again.